Morning of September 15, 1939. The humid air of eastern Poland carries the sharp stench of churned earth and burned gunpowder, mixed with the metallic tang of fresh blood along the banks of the San River. The sun struggles to break through gray clouds, casting long shadows over columns of German soldiers advancing like an unstoppable tide. In Jaroslaw, a forgotten little town on the muddy plains, the distant roar of tank engines echoes like muffled thunder, while the ground vibrates under heavy boots. It's here, in this front forgotten by the world, that Poland's fate intertwines with the shadowy presence of a man watching from an improvised post, the Führer, standing amid the morning mist, his eyes fixed on his troops of the 14th Army Division crossing the river. The cold wind whips the swastika flags, and every soldier's heart races, not just from the bone-chilling cold, but from the certainty that the end of Polish resistance is in sight. Meanwhile, to the east, the echo of the Battle of the Bzura still resounds like a choked scream. Started 6 days earlier as a desperate Polish counterattack. The offensive that once promised to turn the tide now dissolves into puddles of mud and shards of hope. Polish generals, with crumpled maps in trembling hands, order retreats under a sky infested with German planes. Stukas dive like hungry hawks, their sirens wailing a mechanical lament that freezes the blood in the veins of those running on muddy roads. The smell of spoiled fuel hangs heavy, blending with the odor of exhausted horses collapsing, their hooves slipping in red mud. Polish soldiers, in torn uniforms and faces covered in layers of dust and sweat, carry the wounded on their shoulders, feeling the dead weight of comrades whose breaths have become whispers. "Advance or die trying," shout the officers, but panic is palpable, the dry crack of German machine guns slicing the air like invisible scythes. In the Battle of the Bzura, over 150,000 Poles fought with a tenacity bordering on despair. But now, with flanks exposed, the German encirclement closes like an iron trap. Panzer tanks rumble forward, their tracks crushing hedges and indistinct bodies, leaving a trail of black smoke that obscures the horizon. Further west, Warsaw trembles under the relentless aerial assault. Heinkel bombers emerge in swarms, dropping their deadly load on the city looming like an open grave. The boom of explosions reverberates through narrow streets, shattering windows into showers of sharp glass that cut the skin of civilians rushing to improvised shelters. Dust and smoke choke the air, turning day into eternal twilight. The bitter taste of ashes invades the dry mouths of mothers clutching their children to their chests, hearts beating in unison with the pulsing of the wounded earth. In the suburbs, Polish defenders erect barricades from broken furniture and sandbags, their eyes burning with tears from sweat and terror. A soldier, crouched behind a crumbled wall, feels the scalding heat of a nearby grenade, the air filling with shrapnel buzzing like enraged bees. "Hold the line," echoes a hoarse command, but collapse is inevitable. German forces, reinforced by the 4th and 8th Tank Divisions, press with mechanical fury, turning entire neighborhoods into mazes of smoldering rubble. For the 393,000 Jews in the capital, the horrors of the previous day still echo. The Rosh Hashanah, profaned by bombs that reaped lives in crowded synagogues. Now, fear spreads like a plague, whispering that tomorrow will bring more darkness. In the south, in newly conquered Przemysl, the silence after battle is broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of improvised fires. German troops, with gleaming insignias under the weak sun, scour the streets for suspicious elements. The air smells of sulfur and early decay, while Polish prisoners are lined up against stained walls, their knees buckling on uneven pavement. In nearby villages, like those swept by the Brandenburg division in previous days, the pattern of terror repeats: summary arrests, shootings under flimsy pretexts of attempted escape. A Jewish farmer, dragged from his hut, feels the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his nape, sweat trickling down his back as he whispers prayers in Yiddish. Shots echo isolated, followed by an oppressive silence that swallows the screams. Whispered reports speak of hundreds of bodies left in shallow ditches, the soil absorbing blood like a thirsty sponge. Polish civilians, eyes glazed with shock, bury their own hastily, shovels grating on hardened earth, while the wind carries the distant wail of widows. These acts, disguised as security measures, weave a web of horror spreading across the plains, where premature autumn paints the leaves red, not with beauty, but with omen. Far away, in Moscow, diplomats seal a pact that will echo like a funeral bell for Poland. The agreement between Molotov and Togo ends hostilities with Japan on the Siberian borders, freeing Soviet legions to march west. The click of pens on paper is inaudible, but its shockwaves propagate. T-26 tanks wait in frozen bases, cold engines ready to roar toward eastern Poland. German generals, in improvised quarters, consult maps under lantern light, tracing secret demarcation lines that will divide the nation like a carcass. The Führer, back in his ghost train, rejects proposals for a prolonged siege of Warsaw. For him, the capital must fall under bombs, not hunger. A decision that hastens the hammer of fate. On the front, German soldiers feel the tingle of imminent victory, the hot metal of their weapons still smoking, while Poles retreat eastward, dreaming of Lvov as a last bastion. But the air carries a treacherous humidity, and the horizon closes with clouds of enemy dust. At dusk, the sun sets over fields dotted with vehicle carcasses and abandoned uniforms, tinting the sky a bloody orange that reflects on exhausted faces. In Jaroslaw, the Führer departs, leaving behind a trail of forced cheers and the persistent rumble of columns crossing the San. Poland, once a mosaic of vibrant villages and cities, is now a carpet of ruins where the echo of boots mixes with the muffled cry of survivors. Every distant explosion reminds that war does not forgive. It devours, leaving scars that time barely heals. Tomorrow the siege will tighten, and the world will watch in silence as a nation bleeds. To not miss the next day, subscribe, like, and comment.